really what I was going for. It was like an authentically self-centered, 14-year-old who goes through kind of a coming of age process. And that took some selling. I tell you what,
Okay, without further ado, why don't we get right into that? Let's chat with Brendan Reichs. Hi, Brendan. Welcome to Enter the Popverse.
Thank you very much for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. It's blazing hot outside, but other than that, I have a cave to hide in, and so I'm utilizing it.
That's fair. That's fair. I was going to say on a scale of Clark to Lex, how are we feeling? But I feel like it's going to be somewhere in the middle today.
It definitely is. I'm not like full-blown Clark, but I'm not exuding that Lex confidence that he has at the beginning of my story. So I'm just somewhere in between.
You've got to get like your hair game has to go up and out a little more, I feel like, to Lex confidence, because his hair in this book is spectacular.
We're definitely going to give him hair because that was definitely part of the idea of the character for me. And so they're like, well, what if he accidentally loses as we go along? I'm like, okay, but then it has to be fabulous to start. I mean, let's really make him look good.
So good. But you are such a prolific prose writer. I saw that you were going to come into the world of comics. I was like, ooh, I recognize the name. Very exciting. So I wanted to ask, what has that transition from prose to comics been like for you?
It's interesting. Like putting a story together is pretty much exactly the same. So that hasn't been much of an issue. But writing in screenplay format was interesting, and also writing for comics is so different. My original manuscript had something like 200 pages, and it was chock full of like, okay, from behind left, shooting left to right across the cafeteria. You'll see him in the background. He's speaking. And then my editor quietly nudged me. He's like, someone's going to draw this, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, we should let him do his thing. So Jerry Gaylord is an amazing collaborator on this project. And I was just like, I'll take that out. And it just becomes, they're in the cafeteria, like I realized very quickly to let the art become the art.
Because we evoked Jerry Gaylord, your incredible artist on this book, what was your collaboration like?
It was at first completely separate. I wrote the screenplay because I was really, working from concept, and I wrote it all out, and then we shopped it after that. But I mean, working with Jerry's been great. Like, I mean, I'll be blunt, he deserves all the credit for this book. It's about the pictures. My script is just something that makes his art flow. And he took some amazing, risks and choices in this book, and I supported them all. And so we got to sort of get back and forth on, okay, making things work and things like that. But it was a really fun process to just let him let fly on what he found, and what he came up with was amazing.
Don't sell yourself short, though, because you've taken two of the most iconic superheroes, given them unique and different voices, and aged them down about 20 or 30 years from the way that we're traditionally used to seeing them. So I would love to know, like, what is your relationship to Superman and Lex Luthor? Were you a fan before you came in? And then how do you channel their youthful energy on the page?
First of all, you can imagine the anxiety spikes that I provoked when I was, pitching this project. And it was quite a process. I got to be honest. I was like, well, if I want to write this is really my vision, which was, I wanted to do Clark Kent as an actual like 14-year-old. And I remember myself at 14, and I was a jerk. You're very stuck in yourself. Well, I'm just thinking, like, if I had superpowers at 14, would I have had restraint? No, I would have used them for everything. And so that's really what I was going for. It was like an authentically self-centered, 14-year-old who goes through kind of a coming of age process. And that took some selling. I tell you what, I'm like, here's my idea. Superman as a kid, but a jerk. So they're like, tell me more. And so that's when we sort of got it. I was like, well, what if we made them buddies with Lex? And, a lot of people played around with that relationship.
Yeah.
But I thought it'd be interesting to have Clark start off as sort of the mess, and Lex have things together. And then sort of when they got in the mixer of these circumstances, what would come out. And so I was very pleased and frankly astonished when I got the green light to actually create this project. And they've been hands off the whole time, totally supportive. And I think that's why we ended up with something so great.
It is. It's so fantastic. And also not to like wade too much into spoiler territory, because the book has just come out not too long ago for readers. You get to We get to meet a lot of other interesting superpowered characters. So did you get to stretch when you were doing that? Are you referencing some of your favorite other heroes? What was it like to sort of build out this team that we see?
Sure. When you get the okay to do one of these projects, your first thing is I'm going to pack every superhero in the DC universe into this.
Yeah.
So then they give you the whole like, hold on, fella, let's focus. And so I was
Mhm.
like, okay, but I still want a wide range of diverse characters. And they said, okay, yeah, go nuts, make up some. So I was like, well, that's even more fun. So, I was trying to find like the right competitors for the vibe for the contest that occurs in the
Mhm.
story. And so particularly like Taka Smoke and Jalen Boyd were two that I thought, oh, these are interesting. What they
Mhm.
can do is very, very interesting. And they're really going to challenge Clark, because really this is a story about Clark's flaws and how events and people challenge those flaws until or if he can work through them in order to become the person that he thinks he can be or should be, but is kind of afraid to be. And so these characters are set, almost as like mile markers in his path to becoming, not self-centered, to becoming
Mhm.
a person who thinks of others and does feel the responsibility of his abilities.
That's a good line. You should
Yeah,
remember that. It's almost like
right.
you're a professional writer or something.
Yeah, it's almost like I can come up with another word besides abilities.
I want to encourage people. I love Jalen in this so very much. So if you haven't checked out the book, like keep an eye out. He's such a little sweetie and he's so cute in the book. And maybe an important crux of what's going on. You also do such a fabulous job at making Clark very human. So even though, we all know Superman, he's the archetype for every superhero that we know. But like you said, he really channels a lot of that 14-year-old boy energy, but I think a lot of that comes through his relationship with Pa Kent, your version of Pa Kent, who I love very much. So what was it like trying to put your stamp on that character?
Well, like everything you write, you're really putting yourself into the story. I mean, that's kind of
Mhm.
the secret to make something. If you write something but it doesn't have a lot of emotional arc to it, a lot of character development, what you get is something that might be entertaining but is quickly forgotten. It's the books
Mm.
that sort of you can identify with the growth that resonate and stay with you and you recommend to others because there's something in there, either consciously or unconsciously, you're identifying with. And with Clark, I just understood like that point in a life where you don't know what you want to do and you feel like you can do anything. And you also feel like a lot of things around you are holding you back. And so the relationship,
Mhm.
with the older Kents is really meant to emphasize that. Like he feels so much power in his new burgeoning adulthood and yet is literally told not to explore it because it's dangerous. And so that I've always thought was an interesting dynamic in the Superman legend, like how would
Mhm.
he really respond to that? And so I was like, I'm going to take a little bit more of a modern look at it and say, this is how I think he would respond in the beginning, which is
Mhm.
he wouldn't like being restrained. He wouldn't like being, the bigger person. I always cringed and was mad at, scenes of Superman getting beat up by the fence. I was like, no, whoop them all. You can, you can. So, in my beginning of the story, I give him a little latitude on those points where he's not always going to make the right decision. And that's what I thought is just exploring. Because at the end of the day, he's growing up and he doesn't really know what he's supposed to be. And that could be for anyone, whether you have superpowers or whether you're just going to junior high every day, trying to figure out where you fit, what your place in the world is.
This Clark also has as a young person, a real love of journalism and writing. And I was wondering, is that channeling maybe who you were as a young person? Were you into writing when you were Clark's age?
Well, I mean,
Mhm.
absolutely. And like what I was saying a bit obliquely earlier is like you always put yourself into whatever you write. And
Mhm.
that's the easiest way to tap those emotions. So for me, it was a lot of the same interests, but it was also a lot of the same frustrations.
Mhm.
I too got superpowers and I'm not allowed to use them. So
Mhm.
it's really
Mhm.
frustrating for me just in general. I can't fly
Thank you
around
for
like I'd
being
like.
thank you for being brave enough to let us know about that.
I figured this was the forum for that admission. But that's sort of what I wanted to capture, and equally that like no one is born, twisted or
Mhm.
unable to overcome their character flaws. So I want to show Lex probably was at one point decent guy, decent kid doing the same thing, and I don't want to over emphasize how adult figures in our life can shape us, but they both have ironically are dealing with the same issue, which is their relationship with their family of origin, I guess. Well, origin is tough in this case for Clark, but I'll go with that anyway.
Right.
And so that was like the struggle they both had. They're both young men under the shadow of their fathers, and how do they react to that? Does it shape them, or does it destroy them?
And Lex does have moments of goodness. He's certainly very, very sweet when we first meet him. He seems like a nice guy.
Oh yeah, I mean that was an absolute non-negotiable. I'm like, no, Lex is going to be great. He's going to be a good person. He's going to be a buddy. He's going to want an honest competition, and he's going to be a helping hand. And he's going to be the more mature of the two when they meet, because Clark is all full of this angst and worry and lack of identity, and Clark is going to not really be experiencing those things. He's much more comfortable, ironically, in his own skin than Clark is at the beginning. And so that was a fun way to sort of twist the usual way that these characters are presented.
And I think you've really done a tremendous job at taking, again, arguably some of the most iconic superheroes of all time and translating them in a very welcoming and straightforward and exciting way for a new audience. If in future you had a chance to write some other books at DC, are there any characters that you're sort of dying to get your hands on and to play with?
Well, not to say it too loudly, but this book clearly would benefit from perhaps another one. And I mean, the title writes itself. Clark versus Lex practically begs to be written. So I definitely think there's more to work with here. As far as the other characters in the DC universe, I took such a big swing. I haven't even thought, like, give me more, because it was, again, I cannot stress enough how in-depth the process was to go ahead with this story, because it is, the crown jewel of the DC universe that you're asking to twist up and mash. And so, there was a bit of hesitancy, but, to their credit and, to Jerry's credit, everybody made it work in the way exactly how I envisioned it. And so right now I'd like to stay on these guys, but I think Lois deserves a little bit of a say. I think there's other people in this universe that could show up in a later volume.
And as someone with such a deep bibliography at your back, what advice do you have for any aspiring writers who might be watching?
My writing advice is pretty simple. You got to write all the time. Practice gets you closer to perfect. And I'm a big believer in Gladwell's 10,000 hours, and that anyone can write a successful story or a successful novel. It's just hard, but not hard in the sense that you need some inspiration. I hear a lot of panels that I'm on, and somebody's like, oh, I don't know where my ideas come from. They just, one day I sit down, they come, and I'm like, that is not how writing works. Writing is work. I mean, it's not lying. It's fighting through that day. You don't want to write anything, so it all comes out as like, C spot run. But the point is you get something on paper, because books are made in editing. They're not made in the first draft. I don't know that anybody did more damage to the writing perception than Hemingway, who just sits down drunk and writes a book on a typewriter and it's done and he turns it in and he's a genius. But that's not really how it works. In reality, it's a lot of drafts and editing. So, get your reps in. Your third book is better than your first book. And that's not to be intimidating. It's just to say, you got to go through the process. But, and I say this every single time, anyone can write a great story. Anyone can do it. It can be learned. It is not an art. It's a skill. So do not be discouraged, but you got to finish. That's, the other thing is finish what you're working on. People get 2/3 way through. They're like, I don't know what happens next. I'll just power through and finish, because if you don't, you can never really send it out and get feedback. And that's really when you can call yourself a professional writer. It's not about getting published, because you don't have any control over that. But when you write a finished product and you let somebody else read it for criticism, that's when you're taking it seriously as a job.
Well,
that went all over. I'm not sure if there's anything totally useful in there, but
I feel like you just took us to church. Like, that was great. And then my final question, lastly but not leastly, because here in the Popverse, we are celebrating the best in TV, movies, and comics. What are you geeking out about right now that you are not working on? So no Superman stuff.
What am I geeking on right now? Well, I'm not going to admit that I was super excited about the Fast X, because I don't want anybody to know that. But I definitely am excited for, let's see which one's coming out. I haven't seen the new Flash movie, and I'm excited to
Mhm.
do so
Mhm.
because I heard good things.
Mhm.
And I also am looking for some of the stuff on the small screen that's
Mhm.
coming out. Like, you know, before I did this, I had not actually watched a single episode of Smallville. And then I didn't watch any of it because I didn't want it to color what I was doing. I was terrified at
Mhm.
that point. No, 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 don't watch it because that might seep into your idea.
Yeah.
But, you know, as I get through this now and I've got a good footing in the world I wanted, I think I need to go through and see what they did there, because that's something that, you know, I hear all good things about. So I'd be pretty excited to see what that project looked like.
Oh, I was like, people are going to rush to your Twitter to be like, "You must watch Smallville."
I don't know what I've just done. I might have made a terrible, terrible error, but you know, that's it's the truth. You know, I have to live by honest principles. These, you know, so
Especially as a writer of Superman, you simply must. It must be done.
it must. You know, that's why I kind of wanted to write him as a little bit of a liar, because then I don't have to live up to anything but that, right? That's how it works.
Well,
Only your main character, I think. Is that
definitely not in future volumes.
no, no.
Brendan, thank you so much for joining us in the Popverse today. Can you let everyone know where they can follow you online and where they can come and harangue you to continue a deeper into your Smallville journey?
Sure. This is the actual book. It comes out on the 4th of July. Yay, America. And I am available everywhere. Luckily, I have a very uncommon last name. So if you're looking for me on Twitter, it's at Brendan Reichs. If you're looking for me on Instagram, it's at Brendan.Reichs. Very tricky. And I am on Facebook at Brendan Reichs Books. That's for you older people out there. So I think that covers it. Oh, and my website is brendanreichs.com. Yeah, it's pretty. You see a theme here. You can see,
Uh-huh.
you know, there's a through line in my my social world.
The branding, she's strong. We love it. Thank
Yes.
you again.
Thank you so much for having me.